10 more seconds. Right. We're ready to get started. Good to see everybody. We have several things on the agenda to talk about today. The first will be the minutes from the June 1st meeting. Does anyone have any additions or changes to those? Is everyone able to review them? So sorry, we don't have to take them. Yep, okay. If anyone, if everyone is in favor, please say aye. Okay.
Can we quickly get
Yes.
a motion in a second?
Yes. Motion to ratify the minutes. Please.
I make a motion.
Thank you.
Ray, I'm putting you down for second.
Perfect.
Dashing related to launching of the meeting. Thank you for this procedural. I would be happy to start us off by covering the annual roadmap that was in your packet. And it's essentially a schedule for our fiscal year. Buncombe County operates on the July through June fiscal year, as we know. So we've essentially for this group mapped out the topics and activities for this year, starting where we are here in August. We will be discussing site visits during this meeting today, and that will set staff up to be ready for going in the next couple months. That typically occurs starting in September. So we'll also in September be electing officers and starting to think about our next grant making cycle. Our schedule, we're proposing here to take October off so we can really focus on those visits. Most of them will happen in October, although some through September and into November. We will hope to approve our grant guidelines by December so that we can open up for applications. There's a proposed date of opening up December 11th for FY25, fiscal year 25, which starts July 1, 2024. That application period will be open for 2 months, due February 11th of 2024. And then that puts us into our heavy grant making time. So there's individual reviews and scoring, and then getting together and refining and turning the scores into grant recommendations. Another item of note is we are proposing 2 meetings or 3 if needed for the month of April. That's typical for what we've done in our previous cycles. So if we have not already, we will send out appointment updates so that there's no October meeting in the calendar, and so there's extra meetings. No October, no January. Extra April. Questions or feedback about that plan for the year? Okay. No vote needed.
So I think the next order of business is to discuss site visits. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to go over what everyone thinks about doing site visits this year, what they think the schedule should be if you do them, and how to do it, whether it's virtual or in person. So I want to kind of open up a little bit about the site visits. We have some new members. So I want to go over what we did last year and then open it up and we'll talk about it. Last year, there were 36 site visits. There were 14 in person, 22 were virtual. They were about 45 minutes long. We went over sometimes into an hour just to ask some questions sometimes. But I believe that we suggest that they be about 30 to 45 minutes. There's a presentation often or just a discussion. It can be more on the presentation side, the ones that are virtual and the ones in person. Typically, it's more of a moving around tour of facilities. And we scheduled them between October and December of last year. The way that we structured it was that Fridays were held in the afternoon, a 3-hour block for virtual meetings. Then in-person meetings were scheduled as they could be throughout the week. Then committee members were asked to attend whichever ones they could. We try to get 2 committee members to each one. Sometimes that, there were plenty where that absolutely worked and some where it didn't. It is a lot of visits. This year it's going to be a lot less because I believe we only have 22.
23 is sticking in my mind, but it's
Okay.
in the 20s.
So that's significantly less than it was last year. So that should tighten up our timeline that we're devoting to doing the visits. But some of the questions I want to ask are, do we want to do them this year? And what do we want the format to be? So that's what I'd like to open up for discussion for everyone. If anyone has any ideas or questions about what happened last year or the year before. There was one year where they were all virtual, I believe. COVID. Yeah. So we gave the option to be virtual to each organization last year, whether they wanted virtual or in person. And they chose, and that just kind of dictated how we showed up.
What was this still again?
36 visits, 14 in person, 22 virtual.
I would like to do that just to see kind of our work's progression, what they're doing. It would help me understand better next year when I'm reading them, kind of puts the faces with what I've read. So, I mean, did you all think they were helpful? For sure.
I want to talk last.
Okay. So, yes. Okay. I would think it'd be nice to see some of them for sure.
So when you say a 3-hour block on Friday, is that for one, or is it multiple?
So there, we stacked them back to back with 3, and you did not have to go to all 3. You could pick 1, pick 2. It's whatever worked with your schedule.
Did you ever record them so that we share with members?
So we did that.
That might be, if we do them and do it virtually, that would be helpful. Because schedules can be prohibited to actually participate.
Is that possible? Sure. Oh, okay, great. That's a great suggestion.
I mean, I'm curious and I would like to participate, but schedules are hard. So that could be a barrier. And I'm guessing, I do think there is this, like, how do in-person and virtual tours bias you in the future? So I don't know. I think it's a good service to the organization for them to see our attention and to hear their follow-up, and a good service for us to just ensure that, people are actually working towards the goals of their grant. So I think it's important that there is some kind of structured follow-up. So site visits seem reasonable. I'm torn about the in-person because if you're, and part virtual, because if you just see things differently when you see things in person. Can anybody speak to how their in-person site visits influence their thoughts? I don't know.
Well, I only went to one in-person site visit, and it was an office-based visit in a conference room. So that's why in-person doesn't necessarily mean more.
Yeah.
But I felt really the impact. I mean, I think the virtual ones have been going really well, but it's in part because people are so used to virtual meetings due to COVID. As time goes on, it's going to be less and less.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like the idea of letting the organization decide the way
Mhm.
they want to do it and continue to have that option.
I completely understand and appreciate what you're saying, that it creates some bias. And I can reflect the lessons to reflect, but I appreciate the idea, but I'm also curious.
Mhm.
I want to see it in person, and I feel like there's a benefit to it. I'm wondering if there's not a bit that the organizations know that there's a 3-year cap per program, so maybe that language of those parameters can be dialed in. And I'm also wondering if there's not a way to create some outreach in the process of the site that encourages organizations or programs to help spread the word. I don't know what that
You mean
looks like.
offering people to
don't know.
present or do site visits that don't have grants?
Maybe, yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought through,
Uh-huh.
it's just an idea, is there an outreach component to doing site visits?
Uh-huh.
Help organizations within themselves or even help them facilitate outreach to other organizations, like, hey, you guys, this is your 3rd year,
Mhm.
you're not eligible next year, or your kids won't get your arena.
Yeah.
You're waiting to pass this information on to. Just to help push it and,
Particularly like an
Yeah.
environmental, that, where we're having so much trouble.
Yeah, and in the site visits last year, the staff generally brought up that if they were in the 3rd year of their funding and kind of explained the rules to them, and some of them really hadn't been aware of it. So I think that is important to do.
Yeah, we definitely did highlight that last year with the site visits, because we were curious what would happen next for each of the ones that were facing that 3-year cap.
So I absolutely love site visits, and the in-person ones more than the virtual ones. I think the in-person ones are more impactful. There's some nonprofits, some people doing work where it doesn't really matter because you're not actually interacting with the work they're doing on site, but others you are kind of seeing very vivid ways like what's being done. And I absolutely loved it. And because I love it so much, I really think that introduces bias. Now I'm having, I understand the work the organization does in a way that I don't for other applicants. And I think that actually makes an unfair, biased process the following year. And I understand what Mark said, that it's a 3-year cap, but often organizations then pivot into a different project. And I think I'd still carry forward. If I had a good impression of that organization, that's still going to impact me. As I've been listening, I've been thinking, well, what can we do about this? And it's really hard. So actually why I wanted to go last, because I think even last year giving feedback, I struggled around this because being in community, seeing the work being done, it's a nice ambassadorship for the grant programs of the county and for representatives of the county in a certain way, while not actually being county employees in that way. So I think that's good, and being able to see those different things really can be impactful personally and expand my vision of what's needed and what's happening. And I'm concerned about that bias. As I've been thinking through like the virtual and in-person, preferred in-person, the virtual is also useful. And I wonder if we could offer applications of the option, not the requirement, of doing a video introduction of their work. If it's an existing grantee, then they can describe what they've done with that work. If it's a new grantee, they can describe what they're doing or what they intend to do. And that way everyone's kind of on the same footing. But I wouldn't require it because that would be adding another layer, and it might bias toward organizations that have greater capacity, their ability to do that. It could be that the county actually offers some support then with that because of that bias. You see what I mean?
So is that the alternative to site visits?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I see.
The alternative to site visits,
Yes.
or you would feel comfortable with site visits if there was also a video component?
Actually, I meant it as an alternative to site visits, but that might be my B position. Thanks for getting there, Rachel.
I wasn't trying to steer or direct, I just wanted to make sure I heard.
And I haven't thought
So
about it
it's
at all.
more of a like an outreach, like this, at the end of the year, we would be asking organizations if they want to share their potential projects or something like that.
I think it would more be that if they're planning again next year,
Yeah,
they have the
Okay.
opportunity then to kind of capture their work
Yeah.
in the way that we would be doing on a virtual call. Maybe with some questions about for both people who have been granted that project previously or for new projects and or organizations. You know, you give them a framework of questions to go through. And, you know, I think the bias of the concern around people's capacity, since everyone has their cell phone and we can kind of deprofessionalize them, just make them more casual, that might mitigate that. But I also don't want to add layers, you know, nonprofits, when they apply for grants, and different grants, not just county, like there's so much to do.
Yeah.
It's such a burden that I would want to make it optional.
Yeah.
And then be careful ourselves about how strong the bias is then for people who do the videos. But we can then track that to see what kind of impact that has.
So one thing that's not part of the process, but I think could be, and I've done it in selected cases, is if they have a website that either the general about the organization or describes the program that they're asking for funds for, it might be good to include a link to that in the application, because in some cases I've looked up
I looked up everybody, yeah,
organizations. Yeah, and it really is helpful. It's, in some ways,
Yeah.
it might take the place of the video presentation.
Well, it is a way, most people have a lot of information on their website, it's a way to learn about the organization.
Yeah, I like your idea of, trying to create a balance of, people who don't have the opportunity of us providing a site visit and can present a video. That, in my mind, can almost create a greater bias, to your point, that some organizations have greater resources to do that than others. But a website link, because it's a part of the spreadsheet, it's easy for us to click on. And I'm excited about the idea of site visits, and I think I share your passion for that. But that also, it has crossed my mind, was it'd be hard to turn that off, evaluating next year. But maybe it's a matter of language and presentation and reminding everybody, and there's term limits to the committee, as well as there are limits to years you can apply. So just reinforcing that notion. Because personally, my gripe, regardless of political affiliation, for government and bureaucracy is that it tends to create a disconnect from community. And that's what we're attempting to do here, is provide connection to community and government. I don't know if you say this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've said this before, but I do think, I do acknowledge that there could be a bias in favor of those organizations where we just attended the site visit, but it is spread over the committee, because usually it's only 2 people who might have that experience. But it can go the other way. I remember I attended a site visit that was really compelling. And they described their program in very much detail, including this is where they're located and this is how they do things. When I read the application the second time, they had completely changed a lot of aspects of the program, including the location of the program. And never, in their site visit, they said, we have this beautiful 4-bed facility, it's in a great part of town. They completely moved the location without any justification. And I probably had more insight into those issues, having been at the site visit and really had a good grasp of their program. So I think it can go either way. I think it's more common that we're favored for the press. But I think in reality, a better understanding of what the grantee is about and what they actually did in the last year can also work against them.
I think that there's a depth to it and an interactive nature to the site visits that's really, it's impactful, and I think it's important for keeping the connection with the community in what we're doing. My preference would be to do something similar to what we did last year, which was to offer either virtual or in person, and have we can talk about how many committee members you want to have there or anything. That would sort of be my thought on it. Of course, we'll go with whatever the committee decides.
These aren't a required piece of this. This is just, we're offering, would you like to do this? And then here's 2 options, in person or virtual.
Has anyone declined?
And just to say, like, to that point, the reason you wouldn't decline is because you're showing, it's because you want to get kind of an in for the next cycle.
Yeah,
Right, that's
I mean,
what
that's why you're doing it. It's an inherent bias. And so, like, I genuinely, like, I had everyone I did this for me was positive. The in-person one more impactful than the virtual ones, honestly. And virtual ones are fine. I was glad to do them. But the in-person ones, like, there are a couple that really like struck me. Like, I love doing it. I love being in the community that way. I'm just concerned biases are outcomes the following year necessarily. And that's why organizations want to do them.
Right.
So we have created our application and our scoring criteria to try to bring that objective in. And we know the committee is made up of people with community involvement already. And that's part of why commissioners picked you all, because you're knowledgeable, involved, have areas of relationships and focuses, not conflicts of interest, but a lot of connections. And when we've looked at the data, we find that the structure does serve us well. So I think as a staff person observing, I have come from a perspective previously that you're sharing around, does it change the outcome of the process if we have this because of bias? But watching, it seems like we have a very good way to bring objectivity in, and it brings all of those perspectives together, creates balance. And every time I've ever listened to this conversation, without exception, committee members say, we need to keep this because it's enriching. And it is something that we want your volunteer experience to be rewarding, and getting a chance to get to know more organizations and people and have these relationships is one of the things that you can take from it. So I have moved from a point of concern or skepticism maybe in the past about site visits to a lot more comfort.
Well, it's important to have the conversation, because now we're all aware that we've got to be really careful
And
about
we have
this
to hold
bias.
ourselves accountable. I say, I don't have to do the hard job of scoring, but we do have to check ourselves
Yeah.
and make sure that we're being fair.
Maybe one thing, it's interesting what you said, Rachel, because I really agree with the idea that we're in community, right? So we bring some biases into the room anyway, and we have interactions with at least certain swaths of nonprofits. I wonder if it might behoove us to, what we've done in the past is, Rachel and Angela and Sarah share out those opportunities. We kind of sign up, right? And we're trying to sign up to have 2 per thing. And I not speak for what people have done in the past, but I'm guessing people would tend to sign up for things that kind of interest them, kind of align with your interests. And maybe instead, it should be actually the opposite. So we're actually learning about areas we're less familiar with, where it's more randomized than that. So that we're not just reinforcing our own biases even more broadly, even beyond specific organizations, but rather kind of building our frame of knowledge and building connections in a different way.
I think that's a great suggestion, that we could all be signing up for ones that maybe we don't have familiarity with. We're unsure about how exactly they run. I think last year I just tried to sign up for as many as possible,
Yeah.
and if any was if there was just one committee member signed up, then I signed up so that there would be 2. So I think a lot of it comes from slots. How can I slide in there? How much representation can we get in there? And I think last year we were sent a schedule with them scheduled out, and then it was up to us to let you know what we could attend.
I don't remember the exact mechanics of how you signed up, but we would do it similarly again.
There was an interactive sheet,
Yes.
but I know I couldn't access it
Okay.
through my company card. So
Okay,
I ended up having to email for it, and she was so patient.
that's what we're here.
So, but I think it was an interactive sheet last year that was
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, it wasn't, and I was able to access it, and, you know, you would see the list of the organizations, what date they had been set up, and you would also see how many people had, you know,
Yeah.
the sheet kind of got completed over a period of maybe a week or two. And so you'd see that there were some site visits where nobody had signed up and prioritized setting up. Because actually, it's not always that easy to get two people on these site visits. I mean, there were more site visits last year, but basically, you know, it's not, people have other commitments.
There are times we have to come back out and do an appeal, and we're more comfortable with 3 because if something happens and people can't make it, that still leaves a couple of folks there.
Is there any debrief after these or like anything we learned? It's just kind of for our information, kind of see what the work is being done, but it's not coming back saying, like you said, it's something that's totally different. It's not like rehashing what happened.
From a few perspectives, we'll survey you, and after each site visit and ask you if you have any feedback that you want to share to the organization. And if you have any comments you want to share back to the rest of the committee. And then we compile the committee ones and share them out, send any feedback to the organization. We had a couple, I think, times where we had just check-in conversations, but then if something comes up that seems like it's a specific follow-up need, staff will work on it. Again, this is not an accountability visit because staff is already setting up their project plans and looking at their budgets and talking with them about their progress. So we do have the flexibility to come in from checking in, but not necessarily monitoring. But if we notice something while we're there, we'll certainly flag it.
So is there
Angela, are you chiming in?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, you know, if it's to the point where you guys do want to proceed with site visits, but you are concerned with the biases, and also, Ray, to your point of, you know, signing up for the ones that you want to go to, basically that you have an interest in, and trying to avoid some of that. We could go to a blind sign-in sheet where you don't know what organization you're truly signing up just based on your availability, and then we could plug in the organizations as they sign up for them. I think that would probably be a lot easier with the virtual one than the in-person, because you would have to kind of know like what area of town to know if you have enough drive time and stuff. But that is an option that we could do if that makes it easier for you guys.
Adventure.
It's exciting. It's like a blind date.
Just, you know, we've talked about outreach to potential grantees or potential applicants in the future in areas that we didn't have very many. What do we do? Like, this is the period of time where we would be doing that? Like,
Yeah.
is there something we should be doing to highlight this opportunity to organizations, and what does that look like?
I think that yes, and the section we need more applicants is environment.
Yeah.
And so it would be worth getting together some folks with connections to organizations in environmental and doing some specific outreach.
Is there somebody who's an expert in that area?
I like the Chamber of Commerce. I feel like the Chamber would know.
Yeah, like we have county departments
Yeah.
that
Oh,
there's
yeah,
offices that sustainability that does have some solar work. There's air quality, there's a agriculture and land use department. So I think we have people who have connections. Maybe we could have a session. What could that look like?
I don't know. I feel like we should do something, right?
Let's spin that off from the site visits
Yeah.
and have staff bring some ideas, maybe
Yeah.
in the next meeting.
Because even if we had a conversation with people who are actually in this world doing this work, they probably would have ideas about.
Maybe we could
Yeah.
bring some of those folks
Yeah.
in as guests. at a
Yeah.
meeting.
That would be great.
They wouldn't want to take money from the But they could apply. Like maybe in their
Well, they
third
don't
year,
have to be-
once graduating, like the third year, they could be the guests.
I was thinking
But
our
also
accounting
they're
department is
exempt
doing
from
right.
price.
New freshmen.
So what do we think about the site visits? Is it a yay?
That's okay, yeah.
Do we have a consensus that we will offer them or?
Should I make a motion that we offer them and then we can vote?
Yes.
I make a motion that we continue the site visits along the same lines as last year, where the organizations can choose whether they're virtual or in person.
I second. All in favor?
I'll abstain.
You will abstain. Okay, thank you.
I think I did last year too. I think
A little bit of deja vu. So we'll give them the option and we'll follow up with you as things start getting. Aiming for October as the heavier month with some in September and some in November.
So an idea was raised about randomizing them, and I want to make sure we're touching on whether we're doing that or not.
Okay.
Thoughts?
I'm new, so they're all new to me.
Yeah, right, they are all new.
I think, as Angelin said, it makes a lot of sense for virtual ones, but for like in person, like where they are really matters. It sometimes affects if I'm signing up, if it's, further out in the county, it's a longer thing. That's I might or might not be able to attend that based on what else my schedule is. So I'm not sure it's realistic for the in-person ones, but maybe we could just kind of maybe agree to the sensibility that we'll try to sign up for things that are a little outside of our wheelhouse.
That's great, making a conscious intentional effort to do it. Sounds good.
Do you still,
Maybe one way to address the in-person is that the only qualifier is what district you're in and what region of the county. Maybe that's helpful. Southeast, west, district 1, 2, 3. So you know it's 15 to 20 minutes versus 30 to 40 minutes.
we had blocked Friday afternoons previously. I think the folks that suggested that have rolled off the committee. Does that still make sense? Or do we just want to do them at the availability of the organizations?
I don't have any tie to which day, but it was helpful to stack the virtual on the same day so that you knew to set time aside in your own schedule for that. That was helpful for scheduling when you've got competing things you've got to do, but but it could be any day that works.
Friday afternoon is more likely for me than most, but I don't know.
3 is a lot for me. Stacked for a 3-hour block would be big. Like 2, I can do, preferably Friday. But
And again, if it's virtual, we can record it.
And just to be clear, you wouldn't be signing up for a 3-hour block. You'd sign up for hour blocks within the.
Oh, so you're
Yeah,
not.
so it's up to you
Oh,
how many you
You
attend.
could still do one of the
Okay.
3, but
Yeah.
if you wanted to do all 3, you would have the ability, like Kate was saying, to just get
Okay.
3 done in this one sitting.
Gotcha.
And you
That was
know,
your assigned block, and so, okay.
I love the idea of recording them.
Yeah.
But then in person would be recorded down.
That would bias the.
And then bias it to be virtual.
I'm
gonna go there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be problematic for staff to report that ones that are in person. I know it's easy to do it when it's Zoom, but is that kind of challenging?
And my phone, going like this.
I do it actually.
You do it?
I could do site visits, but it's.
Give everyone one.
I don't know, I mean, I would be really challenged.
I do it for different purposes.
Yeah. Anyway, just a question.
I don't know if that's feasible, but we'll think it through. The virtual ones are easy to record because there's a button that's all computerized. We'll also follow up on your question about, is there a way to collect the video during the application phase? So we'll follow up on all
Going back to Dan, I like Friday. I don't know about anyone else, but Mondays never go as planned. So I'll just wait to do on Mondays.
So, I work for Physician Network. We have engagement requirements for physicians. And anything that's recorded, we can put as an option for them to learn about and engage in. So, it just occurred to me, this would be actually really nice. We're trying to make sure people understand all the opportunities and how they can engage in care management. But I think people could learn a lot about the organizations in their community. So we have a lot of outside Buncombe County practices too, but it is a lot, probably a lot of these organizations still are heavy as well. So we probably want to tell them, get permission before we share.
Yes.
Well, we've been collecting a list of all of these ideas and we'll follow up and come back with.
And Friday afternoons are still where we're leaving for virtuals. I believe it's 1, 2, and 3 for the time slots last year. Yeah, no, sorry. 1, 2, 3, and 4 was an option last year as well.
My favorite time for a meeting of all time is for me.
4 o'clock on Friday.
We'll be on here.
One thing that was helpful for the site visits last year, but I want to do it in a better way than I did it last year, because I think Angela and I emailed you like probably and sometimes an hour before to ask you for a copy of the application, just so that I could refresh before, so that I had questions ready. If we could figure out a way to make those applications easily available, so we're not bothering you.
Yeah.
So that we could just refresh and prepare for the meeting, that would be really helpful.
I think that's a great idea, and we'll give you the scope of work, which is what we negotiated with each partner based on their application, but then based on the award amount, the activities they'll be completing, how they're using funds.
Does anybody have anything else about site visits that you want to discuss? All right, our next item up for discussion is the election of officers. So for the next fiscal year, we have the opportunity to elect new officers. And Ray, just months ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really short term.
It would be. But I wanted to open that up. If anyone is interested in an office, if you have someone you want to nominate, then I think now is the time to think about it. You can even do it by email, right?
Yeah, typically we do this over 2 meetings, introduce the conversation now, and then come back next month.
So for the next fiscal year, if you're thinking about an office or you're thinking about someone else for it, now's the time. And if you have questions about any of the duties, it's the perfect time to ask.
And there's no term limits, so there's nothing saying you can't keep the same officers if that's what you want to go to as well.
Right, no term. Yeah. So it's something to think about. It doesn't occur to you now, it can certainly come up after the meeting or in the next meeting.
So it's with the fiscal year, it's lined with the fiscal year, which is July, right?
In theory,
So are we doing this for next July or are we doing it for now? We're doing it for right now. Okay, got it. Thank you. That's definitely a little thrown off right now.
Yeah. So if no one has anything right now, we can certainly revisit it before the end of the meeting. But the next item on the agenda is the committee presentation, which is coming on the 15th.
It is so exciting.
Yes. Well, so did everyone get a chance to take a look at the presentation? And Ray and Amy, you're doing it for us, right?
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
so this is an opportunity for you all to run through and share anything with the rest of the group that you've come up with, and for me to present.
We're meeting after this meeting.
And for me to insert it as a addition to the draft that you all have come up with so far, a slide getting at some of the geography. And so that's a piece that I'll cover. Before we get to the geography slide, Angela, if you want to just, that you display, walk slowly so that we can see what's included. And rating if there's anything specifically mentioned.
I think just broadly to know, our intention is to split the slides, and I think in text, so I'll do the first half and then the second half, rather than go back and forth, because.
And I'll be there as cheering you on.
We need to update maybe the membership list. Those were the members from the prior cycle. So maybe that was the intent of having Chuck's name on there. Chuck has rolled off, and we have a member who's been appointed, Anne Flynn is her name, and she's been active in a lot of nonprofits. She's a retiree and was appointed by the Board of Commissioners on Tuesday. So we let her know on Wednesday that this meeting was happening today on the off chance that she could make it, but she had already had plans for today, so she'll join us tomorrow. So Angela, maybe just earmark the members list. We should label it as FY23 members.
And that was the committee who created what they're presenting,
Yeah,
right?
that
So,
makes
yeah.
sense. We're imagining your presenter voices in our mind.
So in the past year, you're right, FY24, did you mention FY25? It's like working in the future, sorry. This is 23, right?
And so I always get confused.
Yeah.
Did we always have the eligibility criteria that they have to be an active operation for a minimum of 2 years?
That came, yes, yeah, that came with the formation of the committee.
Interesting, because I don't think I ever realized that.
We're pre-screening,
Okay.
and if there's an organization that doesn't meet that threshold, we work with them to try to find a fiscal agent.
Rachel, I'm gonna flag that one too, because for some reason I was thinking it might be 2 years. Right? Oh, it is. Never mind. I'm looking at the 3 years for the project. Never mind. We're good.
We're good. This is an interesting juxtaposition between what was requested and what was granted. It does set the stage for a potential that we could go to commissioners with the budget request and ask for an expansion of the amount of funds earmarked for this program. We have good data about the need for the funds.
That was a question I was gonna raise, is this the appropriate time to ask for that during this presentation?
I think it's an appropriate time to signal it. An appropriate time to actually make the request is through the budget process, which happens, staff turns it in by January and it gets considered in the spring.
Rachel and Angeline, I see that 16 projects were renewal applications, 55 were new project proposals. And to be honest, I don't remember what slides are following, so if this is on it. But of the projects funded, do we know how many projects were renewals and how many were new?
I don't know if go ahead.
We can make sure that we have that and share it with you so that you have it as a talking point.
Great, thank you. And it may be on a subsequent slide, I just don't remember.
pie.
Who made these slides? Sarah and all y'all?
We were speaking with Sarah, and there were some adjustments from our initial run through. And this was one of the slides I think that got adjusted.
The one behind it, the previous, and that's a huge, just glancing at it, 3 million was requested. But could you do a pie or some kind of, this was requested, this is what's funded? Some quick visual that they'd be like, ooh, that is a lot that we couldn't do. That would just maybe kind of pop out quick. Because
That's a good suggestion.
other way, otherwise, it's 3
Yeah.
million, and the 900, yeah, that looks close, but if you could make it as,
Can be more compelling.
Angeline was also on that call. I think we went with the percentage, we shifted from a dollar percentage to the application percentage.
Yeah,
Because
like
the dollar percentage looked kind of ghastly for one of the categories. I think that was Angeline's smart suggestion.
And Kathy, it's, we can show it's like more than 3.5 times.
Yeah.
the amount.
Yeah.
We can somehow figure it out.
like how to make, if we want to ask for anything, make it look just shocking. Using the truth, but shockingly, you're right, we set this stuff in really pretty high last year. But yeah, I like the applications one.
One thing for me, doing this slide especially, when we're looking at the categories, to make sure I remember to say, kick me, that people are self-selecting their categories, right? Because because you could have checked different boxes.
Yes, yeah.
It's biasing like how we're claiming here.
And we're forcing them into one category per project.
Yes.
For the purpose of this demonstration.
And I wonder if, like, I think we had a conversation maybe at that meeting, that can we allow them to check more than one box?
But we would not be able to make.
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to do that, I understand. But making sure that's written down somewhere.
How is that different from the last?
This is breaking down the subparts.
Okay, thank you.
So like, what does well-being mean?
Gotcha,
That was the
thank you.
great question, the previous one, and has to break out.
Thank you.
This slide is what I'm suggesting we add. Commissioners really care a lot about service spread throughout the county. And that makes sense that they are representing all kinds of diverse places within the county, and that they're elected in place district-based elections. So I've got constituents, those 3 different commissioner districts are color shaded in. So last year we brought a map forward that showed the address of every funded organization. We understood that didn't tell the whole story, because that's the main address of an organization, not necessarily where services are delivered. So this year in the application, we asked organizations to tell us the primary location of where services are delivered. We still got a lot of information. We can refine how we ask that question to try to be more clear. But we've gone through each of the grantees and specified the addresses. So there are more dots on this map than there are funded organizations because of multiple locations. An example being services that are delivered at multiple elementary schools. Those dots all appeared. This is a look at the distribution of where services happen as a result of these grants. We also know this doesn't tell the whole story, so we asked a question about where do the people live whom this project is serving, because a group might be located in West Nashville and serve a lot of Canterbury residents. The information that came in that question was qualitative and didn't lend itself to mapping. So the point here is that we hear that having a balanced portfolio is geographically is point of consideration for the grant, for these grants. And we're continuing to look at this data as part of the process.
Okay, I have a question. Sorry, that was so well said and beautifully said. And is it true? Like, are we as a committee really taking into account geographic balance?
I think it is true, and it's
I mean,
also,
it's the outcome, but
I
is
think-
it like process?
I think it's true, and I think we have
When
more
we
to,
assess needs.
more to do, more that we could do.
Yeah.
Another example that I feel like is a fair comparison is we don't allocate a certain amount of funds for education or environmental well-being, but we sort of watch that as we go. And so keeping an eye on how the portfolio is shaping up. The location of an organization does not factor into its scoring. So the decisions are made based on other criteria.
Do we have an actual count of the number of dots in each district?
Yes. And we can send you the
Great.
list that fit it.
Perfect. Because if I was commissioner, I might ask that. See a lot of dots. It's a breakdown.
And I can't see very well, so is there any way we can like make it, the wording smaller by a quarter and like the map a little bit more pronounced, or is it purposely? I try and see where I live, I'm like, oh, no.
Yes, we'll see if we can expand it a little.
They have copies, I mean, they have a cleaner.
Does anybody have any ideas about how to collect data that would lend itself to mapping?
So I sent the Insecure 360 data
Yes.
for Montgomery County.
Mhm.
And we have the organizations that are enrolled in their locations, and we do collect, they all collect client data and we collect referral data, so we know what. So I have the data by county, and we will be able to get to district level and zip code level data, but it's only for the services provided for Insecure 360. But you can see, we have like, in medicine, we call it hot spotting. We have certain data around where we see specific needs pop up, clinical needs, and then you have with this Insecure 360 data where we see lots of referrals for different types of services, housing. So that could be useful. I think we're still really early in it, but it could be useful in the future because it is showing, we're seeing. I mean, I was just impressed to see how much has gone on in the past year. I just showed you guys that one year.
There's a new tool coming out of the county called the Community Index, which is going to be an online interactive map that shows a lot of needs and services. And so we're strategizing as a staff about how could information like that be practically applied by committee members during grant making. Going in with an awareness of where pockets of need are could be really helpful.
So in like the government areas, CMS, they have this area deprivation index. That's might be what you're talking about. And they're starting to allocate funding for like federally qualified health centers and other things like that for like risk adjusted populations. So it's going to impact where funding goes for government payers, which I think is, if it works, like it's a good measure. I mean, we measure things all the time and end up not being great measures, but I do think we'll start to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a way to do the map two-phase, like a PowerPoint magic of the first time they see it, it's the 22 or 23 allotted? And then boom, next slide is actually where those B services are going to be, like all the schools and different things.
There probably is a way. I don't know if there's a way.
I don't know if it makes sense.
Trying this in for this presentation.
Yeah. Because almost the deeper we go, like, ooh, do we want to show this? Because I mean, it could all be like in District 1, but then they work in District all of them, so.
It's imperfect.
Right.
And it signals that this is something we're looking at and talking about and thinking about.
I think this is great that this is better than what we did last year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
it's progress.
And it's good for constituents when they're like, oh, I am serving you there for your election. So over here in your district.
It's,
And I added some talking points to the notes version of the PowerPoint that will come to you, I think, when you get this from Sarah or Angela for your use as you wish. Thank you for your willingness to allow this to be included. It is a
I think
topic
it's
that
great.
will, without a doubt, come up
Yeah.
when we talk to commissioners, and so starting the conversation, showing you are aware that this is a priority.
I was curious from the very beginning statistically, how is this going to work out in an equity response to the different categories? And I was satisfied and somewhat surprised to see that it seemed like there was a very even distribution of funds based on the number of applicants in each category. And I'm looking at that map, that's a good spread as well. So it's like, how do you safeguard against that? Knowing that this committee is relatively new and evolving, and that there are limitations, the 3-year limitation of because of 5. How do you safeguard and going forward with the scoring criteria? We need to start brainstorming new categories
Extra
based
points for rural or extra points for.
different districts or what does that look like? And then additionally, to me, it just keeps screaming outreach, outreach, outreach is going to be like a continuum. And how to develop and evolve outreach for this community.
I think it's true that the staff actually does most of the outreach at this point.
It's not necessarily the best way, though. I mean, we do hope
But
that
just to acknowledge it,
that the committees brings your own networks that you're connected with, and hopefully are sharing it with your networks, which is going to bring more awareness than just the connection that we have with the organization. And heard loud and clear in outreach, we're gonna think about that and come back with some ideas for next time. And I think take you up on the idea to potentially have committee members help with that.
Challenge with outreach, and I tend to post when cycles open up and for the end of them, is that if we're then doing beyond that, like when personally calling someone, hey, have you heard about that? That then I have to be careful about my own bias in reviewing it. Let's assume I don't have a relationship that precludes it anyway, and that I wouldn't reach out to those organizations that I'm participating in, and I participate in a whole bunch of them, because if they do, then I have to leave the committee. So it's, if we're really pushing the areas we work in, it's hard not to have a bias around that too, right? So, it's all just kind of being cautious with ourselves and our choices around that.
Is there a county registry of qualifying organizations that can receive the exact same information at the exact time?
To some extent, we try to keep distribution lists going. I was pleased to see how many organizations were new to the process and how many projects were new to the process. We try to quantify that on the funding side instead of just the application side. When I went back and looked at that slide, it looked like we counted it based on new projects, not new organizations.
Right.
And there's a difference. So
Yes.
we can look at both.
To Mark's question, is there a list of all nonprofits? Like, is that
You could
determinable?
You could theoretically get that from the North Carolina Secretary of State. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that are operational or service delivery in nature. Buncombe County has a nonprofit called Buncombe County Service Foundation that sits kind of in the background. And so that's like a hugely long list. So we try to maintain the local groups.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additions to the highlights or questions about them? This was one of the quirkier slides.
I would just highlight, we have an amazing group of people in Buncombe County who do amazing things in all different kinds of ways. And for them to stand up and show their, the wave their flag of what they do is impressive to me, being new, so however you say that, but taking pride.
I think the first two bullets under nonprofits are things to get out of that. Without you singing and dancing.
Some sizzle on that steak.
And the thing that I noticed that you all did differently this year, Kate mentioned it earlier, is funded projects to a greater extent. It's 80 to 100% of what was requested was a move that was really intentional. It did limit the number of projects that got supported. And it allows those groups to be more effective in their work.
Did we just plan for the next grant cycle?
How much time is allocated for this discussion?
It's not fixed, I would say 10 to 15 minutes.
I think we just decided that the word potential can go away here because we're doing community site visits. I think, and then we just planned for the next grant cycle too. At the point we made these slides, we hadn't had this meeting yet.
Were you able to hear that, Angela?
Yeah, I'm noting it.
Great.
And on this, the process improvement discussion, you'll see the first bullet is to request additional funding from the commissioners.
Do next steps and process improvement seem like they're flip-flopped? When I saw next steps, I was like, okay, that's the last slide.
Yeah, they seem backwards to me.
Yeah.
We want to put it up to 1 million or let them fill in the blank?
Oh, yeah.
Why cap? Insert pie chart here. More money than requested.
It's $100,000 for one day.
Let's make that one more person.
Do you want to strike that 1 million, Angela?
So just take off the 2 to 1 million and just leave it as increase the strategic partnership grant fund.
Yeah.
I think the reason to do it, to leave it, may be that asking for more is unrealistic in the current economic environment. But asking to get for an extra 100,000 to get to 1 million from 900,000 may be realistic. It's like a reasonable ask, and without a specific ask, it's less likely to happen.
Yeah.
There's so many strategies involved there.
Absolutely.
That's where I meant, like, oh, that's the next increment.
Just
That
round it
seems
up.
reasonable.
Just round it up.
Nice. And then another budgeting strategy is to, similar to a grant writing strategy, ask for a little more and expect a partial.
So we could say like 1.2, we're trying to get to 1 million.
Or just fund additional 500,000. But 200,000, 100,000.
Different 100,000.
Yeah. just one additional.
So leaving it open-ended.
I know. Everyone has a
And
different.
whoever's got that slide.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Is 9% funded kind of in line with the other grant programs, or are we at a lower percent funded? Because we're so diverse.
I don't know.
It'd be interesting
Yeah,
to
what
know.
do you think compared to the
So that
other?
would be an argument for money, so we cover some of the areas.
Uh-huh.
More strategic.
And we're strategic.
Strategy.
But that's such an excellent point, Liz,
Yeah.
that actually is to look at all the grant programs, what the area, what the needs are that are being met there, what the need actually is, for where the money should bias. We can't have every committee just fighting for padding its own, top line.
Is that something you might have, like where we are compared to other communities?
Water's fine.
And we'll use it if it's favorable.
Not for this presentation, but we can get it. On the consider bonus scoring, what are the bonus scoring for attributes that we want to see more of in the portfolio, like geographic or issue area?
I think when we have a real conversation around that, especially geographic, it's so hard to do for the reasons that you've said before and said at this meeting, that how we would incentivize, they would like, I'm not sure we figured that out yet.
First, we'd have to identify what we want people to target, to then incentivize them to target.
Well, is this also just a discussion? Is this where the discussion happens, where if there's feedback, that they, you know, because there might be an opinion.
Right, well, I think it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the commissioners obviously can tell us what to do,
Yeah.
can actually determine it.
Yeah.
But often they're leaving it to, a lot of it's left to the
Yeah.
committee to decide, and then we're being kind of guided by staff.
Yeah.
frankly.
And then we'll have to come back and reflect about what their conversation was and how to apply it, because it's not like we would have taken a vote
Yeah.
on the topic, so it'd be kind of a brainstorm. And so if there's a what if idea that's suggested, we need to kind of collect those suggestions and then see what we can make happen.
What Amy described, and you were describing actually as well, is, you know, there may be variable needs that might not align perfectly with existing geographic lines. So I wouldn't want to bias our process toward that unless we knew that it was actually a balanced need between those geographic areas.
Yeah, it's really difficult with Oakland County, it's spread out as it is, and there's national forest and state forest. And you have to consider so many different systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think that's gonna be impractical and we're not gonna do it, bringing it up to the commissioners is only making trouble for us. So, I mean, if they bring up the geographic, you could say, well, we talked about giving bonus points for things like geographic, certain geographic areas. But we really, there are so many things that you could consider doing that for that we decided it was impractical.
So subjective. Bonus points, is that like 0.1, 0.2? Does it put them over the edge? You know, smallness, define, there's definitions, newness, innovation, something that's innovative to me. You might be like, oh, that's 10 years ago. I mean, those are just some subjective things that can hurt people's feelings on the other side.
Yes. So we will be refining our application questions and scoring criteria in the months leading up to December. And perhaps we'll get some feedback or suggestions from this presentation that can inform that.
Did they get this before? Like, did they have their packet that day that they
Yeah.
can review?
We will submit it tomorrow.
Okay.
And they will get it next week. And the meeting is the week following.
Years ago.
Kate?
In the next meeting.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just to the whole committee, is there anything missing that you think should be there or would enhance it?
Any more thought we can go into creating a pie chart with a better strategy for asking for additional funds. Give some thumbs up.
Was there anything on there about, like, actually who got grants? I don't remember. Like,
There
was there
wasn't-
a-
At the end, there's a list of.
Okay,
After the thank you slide.
Yeah, they
Oh, I
have it just
was
accessible to
excited,
them,
okay.
yeah.
Not for presenting, for the packet, so
Yeah.
that anyone looking at it online or commissioners can see the list.
Okay.
The font is kind of tiny.
That's fine. I just, we're highlighting and talking, and then I thought, well, they want to know who these people are, and they're just ignored. Okay.
And
Ah,
it
an
could be
appendix, that's.
on the thank you slide, you actually say that for commissioners who haven't actually read the packet beforehand, before they ask.
Well, if there are no other suggestions for the presentation, I believe our next meeting is September 7th, right here. And see you all then.
Thank you, Katie. Are you making a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I
Yeah.
shall. I think we have the
How
vote.
to adjourn it if you want.
Yes, I
Oh,
thought
look
we,
at you.
yes, we're just gonna.
Adjourn.
this time.
Should we get our gavel? Meeting adjourned.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Angela.
Bye.